The night she told me to quit my job, she was smiling, not the polite kind of smile. The kind that lingers, soft around the edges, like she'd just solved a problem I didn't know existed. You hate it, she said, leaning against the kitchen counter. Every morning you wake up already tired. I was still in my office shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie hanging loose. I remember staring at the microwave clock because it felt easier than looking at her. 9:17 p.m. Too late for dinner. Too early to sleep. I don't hate it, I said. That wasn't exactly true. I didn't love it either. It paid well. It was predictable. It made sense. She walked over, wrapped her arms around my waist. You talk about design all the time. The freelance stuff. The ideas. Why not try it for real? The way she said it made it sound obvious. Like I'd been foolish for not seeing it, I laughed under my breath. Because adults have bills. We have savings, she replied. And I believe in you. That last part hit me harder than I expected. No one had ever said that to me with that kind of certainty. Not my parents. Not my old boss. Not even me. I turned to face her. And if it doesn't work? She shrugged lightly. Then we figure it out. Together. She kissed my cheek and went to finish the dishes, humming. At the time, it felt like support. I didn't notice that she never once asked what my plan actually was. We met 4 years earlier at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. She had this quiet steadiness about her. Not loud, not flashy. She listened more than she talked. When she did speak, it was thoughtful, measured. Back then, I was already working the corporate job. Stable, decent salary, slow promotions. The kind of job parents approve of and you slowly resent. She worked remotely in project coordination. Organized, dependable. The kind of person who color codes her calendar and actually sticks to it. We balanced each other. I was restless, she was grounded, at least, that's how I described it. When we moved in together, it felt natural. We split rent proportionally since I earned more. I covered most of the utilities. It didn't bother me. I liked feeling capable. Useful, but she never liked that word. You don't have to carry everything, she'd say whenever I paid for something extra. I'm not fragile. I thought it was pride. Independence. I respected that. The freelance design work had always been a side thing. Late nights, weekends, small clients. Nothing dramatic. But every time I finished a project, I'd show her like a kid showing a drawing to a parent. She would sit close, studying the screen. You're wasting yourself at that office, she'd murmur. It felt good hearing that. Looking back, not in regret, just in clarity, I realized something strange. She praised the idea of me being more. But she never once introduced me to anyone who could help. Never encouraged networking. Never asked about building a client base. She encouraged the leap, just not the landing. The week I resigned, she baked a cake. I'm not exaggerating. Chocolate, layered, with uneven frosting and new chapter written across the top in shaky icing. She lit 2 candles even though it wasn't my birthday. This is huge, she said, handing me a slice like I just won something. I should have felt terrified. Instead, I felt chosen. Like someone finally saw the version of me I'd kept buried under spreadsheets and performance reviews. My boss didn't try to stop me. That stung more than I expected. 15 minutes in a glass office, a handshake, and a neutral best of luck. Just like that, 5 years reduced to a polite farewell. That night, though, she ordered takeout from my favorite place. She insisted on paying. I'm investing in you, she joked. The first month felt electric. I built a portfolio site, reached out to old contacts, pitched cold emails. She would sit on the couch while I worked, legs tucked under her, occasionally asking, "Any bites?" Not impatient. Curious. When I landed my first decent contract, she hugged me so tight I almost dropped my laptop. I knew it, she whispered against my shoulder. I knew you'd make it. There was something in her voice that I couldn't place then. Not doubt. Not excitement either. Something softer. Almost relieved. The money wasn't huge, but it was enough to prove it could work. I started structuring my days carefully. Gym in the morning. Work blocks. Late night brainstorming. She began coming to bed earlier. "I'll let you focus," she'd say, giving me a quick kiss. At the time, I thought it was support. I didn't notice how quickly she stopped asking how the projects were actually going. By month 3, I was making close to what I used to earn at the office. It surprised both of us. Clients started coming through referrals instead of cold emails. My calendar filled up faster than I expected. I upgraded my equipment. Built systems. I was busy in a way that felt purposeful. One afternoon, I told her I was considering raising my rates. She paused mid-scroll on her phone. "Already? Demands higher. I'm turning people away." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just don't get cocky." It sounded playful. I treated it like teasing, but little comments started slipping in. "You've been on that laptop all day." "Well, yeah. That's the job. I just miss when evenings were simpler." I reminded her that when I worked corporate hours, I was gone 10 hours a day and mentally drained when I got home. "This is different," she said. "You're here, but you're not here." That stuck with me, so I tried adjusting. I moved my workspace from the dining table to the spare room to create boundaries. I set clearer hours. Shut the door at 6, still, she'd stand in the doorway sometimes. "Are you almost done?" If I said yes, she'd nod and leave. If I said no, there'd be a subtle exhale before she turned away. It wasn't dramatic. No fights. No accusations, just a shift in temperature. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. "He's doing well," she said. Then quieter, almost laughing, "Too well, honestly." I told myself I misheard. People say weird things jokingly, but I replayed that tone in my head for days. Around month 5, things started going missing. Nothing dramatic. A charger. A notebook where I kept client notes. Once, a flash drive with drafts on it. I blamed myself at first. Working from home blurred everything. Days bled together. Maybe I'd misplaced them. She was sympathetic. "You're juggling a lot," she said, handing me coffee. Of course things slip. One afternoon, I spent 2 hours looking for an external hard drive. It had a near-finished project on it. A tight deadline. My chest felt tight, like the walls were inching inward. She helped me search. Opened drawers. Checked under the couch. We didn't find it. I ended up emailing the client, asking for an extension. It was embarrassing. The first time I'd ever done that. That night, she was unusually affectionate. Sat closer than usual. Rested her head on my shoulder. "It's okay," she murmured. "Maybe this pace isn't sustainable." The comment lingered. A week later, I found the hard drive, in the hall closet. Inside a shoebox with winter scarves. I stood there holding it, trying to reconstruct how it could have ended up there. I don't store work equipment in closets. I barely even opened that door. When I asked her if she'd moved it while cleaning, she looked confused. "Why would I put your work stuff in a closet?" She didn't sound defensive. Just puzzled. I nodded, letting it go. But that night, lying in bed, I thought about the phone call. The missing things. The small comments about pace and presence. An uncomfortable idea flickered at the edge of my mind. I pushed it away. She was the one who encouraged this. Why would she want it to fail? The false answer came to me on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just wrapped a video call with a long-term client when I heard her laughing in the kitchen. Not the polite laugh she used with coworkers. This one was lighter. Intimate. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. But when you work from home, walls aren't walls. They're suggestions. "I don't know," she said softly. "He's just different now." A pause. "No, it's not bad. Just intense." My stomach tightened. I stayed still, headset hanging around my neck, pretending to reorganize files while listening to every shift in her tone. "You remember how he used to need my advice for everything?" she continued. "Now he barely asks." Another pause. Then a quiet, almost playful, maybe I created a monster. That sentence landed wrong. I stepped into the kitchen louder than necessary. She ended the call quickly. Who was that? I asked. Just a friend. Something in me decided on a story right then. The easy one. The dramatic one. She was having an emotional affair. It fit. The distance. The small jabs. The comments about me changing. It would explain the tension without forcing me to examine anything else. For 3 days, I lived inside that assumption. Checked her tone. Watched her texting. Measured her silences. She didn't act secretive. Didn't hide her phone. Didn't flinch when I entered a room. If anything, she seemed calmer, and that's when it started to feel less like betrayal, and more like something else entirely. Not cheating, control. The moment everything snapped into focus wasn't dramatic. No screaming. No slammed doors. It was a spreadsheet. She had left her laptop open on the dining table while she showered. I wasn't snooping. I was grabbing my water bottle when I noticed my name in a cell, not in a message, in a budget sheet. Curiosity isn't noble, but it's human. I looked. There were 2 columns labeled stable plan and freelance phase. Under stable plan, my old salary was listed. Under freelance phase, there were projected numbers, lower ones. Much lower, far lower than what I was actually making. Next to the lower figures were notes: more time together. Less ego. Shared decisions. My throat went dry. I scrolled further. There was a 3rd column. Recent. Updated figures. My real income. Next to it, a single comment: unsustainable dynamic. The shower turned off. I stepped back like I'd touched something hot. When she came out, towel wrapped around her hair, she saw my face before she saw the screen. What? She asked. I didn't accuse her. I just turned the laptop toward her. For a split second, just one, her expression wasn't confusion, it was calculation. Then it smoothed out. It's just budgeting, she said carefully. Why are my lower earnings labeled less ego? Silence stretched between us, not angry, measured, like she was deciding how honest to be. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She sat down slowly, like we were about to discuss grocery lists. You've changed, she said. It wasn't an attack. It was observational. Clinical. I'm busier, I replied. You're bigger. She struggled with the word. More certain. You don't ask me things the way you used to. I stared at her. Because I know what I'm doing now. She nodded once, like that confirmed something. When you worked that office job, she continued, you'd come home and talk everything through with me. Every decision. Every frustration. I felt involved. Needed. And now? Now you decide. You execute. You tell me what happened after. Her voice wasn't angry. It was almost mournful. You wanted me to quit, I said carefully. Yes. You pushed for it. Yes. And you expected me to. What? Struggle? She hesitated. I thought it would take longer, she admitted. I thought we'd be figuring it out together for a while. Figuring what out? She exhaled slowly. Your confidence. The word hung between us. I liked when you leaned on me, she said quietly. It felt close. Something inside me shifted. Not rage. Not even betrayal. Just clarity, heavy and sobering. You thought I'd fail, I said. I thought you'd need me. There it was, not sabotage for money. Not cheating, dependency. She hadn't wanted my success, she'd wanted my reliance. We didn't break up that night. That's the part people expect. A dramatic exit. A suitcase. A slammed door. Instead, we sat across from each other at the dining table, the spreadsheet still open between us like evidence in a quiet trial. I didn't sabotage you, she said. I never deleted anything. I never touched your work. I believed her. The missing hard drive. She swore she hadn't moved it. And the look on her face when she said it didn't feel rehearsed. If anything, she seemed almost offended I might think she'd go that far. But you wanted me smaller, I said. Her jaw tightened. I wanted us the way we were. The way we were, I repeated slowly, was me doubting myself. That's not fair. Isn't it? Silence stretched. The hum of the fridge filled the space where our easy conversations used to live. I felt important when you needed my input, she admitted. When you'd ask, what do you think I should do? Now you already know. You don't look at me the same. I leaned back in my chair. Because I don't feel lost anymore. There it was. The real fracture, not money. Not time. Identity. She fell in love with the version of me who was searching. Uncertain. Grateful for direction, now I was steady, and she didn't know where she fit, the cruel part. I still loved her. Even sitting there, seeing the shape of her expectations so clearly, I wanted to fix it. But I couldn't shrink back into the man she felt safest with. The weeks after that conversation were strange. Quiet. Careful, she smiled, but differently. Polite. Controlled. The warmth I remembered felt rehearsed, like she was testing whether I'd noticed the shift. I noticed. I tried to bridge it at first, suggested shared projects, weekend trips, small rituals to feel connected again, but every idea hit a subtle wall. I don't want to pressure you, she'd say. But the pause after the sentence carried tension. Not anger. Not refusal. Hesitation that said, I don't want you growing beyond what I imagined. Work started consuming more of my time again. Not because I was escaping her, but because I couldn't ignore the clients, the deadlines. The momentum. My confidence had grown too loud to shrink. She would sit at the dining table while I worked, a book in hand, occasionally looking up with that soft, unreadable expression. No comments. No guidance. Just presence, like a shadow that once felt comforting and now felt like observation. One evening, I asked, quietly, almost testing her, do you regret encouraging me to quit? Her eyes didn't flicker. Not a hint of false sweetness, no, she said. I believed in you. But the pause before her next words cut sharper than any argument could have. I just didn't expect you to succeed so completely. The truth settled between us like dust. She had wanted me to depend on her. To remain small enough for her to feel central. She hadn't expected me to thrive. I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of sorrow and relief. This wasn't betrayal in the traditional sense. It wasn't a secret affair or financial manipulation. It was something subtler. Deceptively human. Possessive love disguised as support. I realized, with a strange, almost painful clarity, that some relationships aren't about growth at all, they're about comfort zones, and I had grown beyond hers. It wasn't explosive, but the shift was relentless. I started noticing patterns I'd ignored before. Little comments, casual observations that weren't malicious but carried a weight I couldn't shake. You're working late again? She'd ask softly, tilting her head. Not concern, expectation. Like she was checking that I hadn't outgrown the life she imagined for me. Just finishing a project, I'd reply, oh, she'd say, letting the word hang. It wasn't accusatory, but it had gravity. A subtle reminder, you're moving too far ahead. I began wondering if I should slow down. Not because I wanted to, but because it was exhausting, carrying her silent judgment with every decision. My confidence felt like a light she didn't want in the house. One Friday night, I offered to cook. I pulled out ingredients, chopped vegetables, played music. She watched, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. This is nice, she said. Her voice lacked the warmth it used to have when I tried to impress her. I realized then that I hadn't just outgrown her expectations, I'd outgrown the version of the relationship she wanted entirely. I stopped trying to match her pace, stopped softening my victories. And she started withdrawing, subtly, almost imperceptibly. Not confrontational, just quieter, more contained. By the time I finished that meal, a simple stir-fry that took 40 minutes, I felt a strange combination of pride and melancholy. I had built myself up, followed her encouragement, and now the person I'd become didn't quite fit in the life we shared. I caught myself watching her later that evening, lying on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Not suspicion, just trying to understand what I had lost in the process of winning. It wasn't love lost. It was the version of love that required me to stay small. And I had stepped outside of it. By month 8, the tension had settled into a quiet rhythm, almost imperceptible if you weren't paying attention. She started leaving small notes around the apartment. Don't forget to rest on my desk, remember to breathe on the bathroom mirror, dinner at 7. On the fridge. At first, I thought it was sweet. Thought it was her way of staying involved, but the notes had a pattern I couldn't ignore. They were reminders not for my health or happiness, but for my pace. Each one gently nudged me to slow down, to stay manageable, to fit into the life she had always imagined. I found myself hesitating before sending proposals, delaying projects, even double-checking client emails because a subconscious part of me was measuring her reaction. One Sunday afternoon, I asked her to join me for a walk. She smiled and nodded, but when we stepped outside, she kept glancing at her watch. Everything okay? I asked. Yes, she said quickly. Then, after a pause, I just like knowing where my evenings go. That phrase stung more than any argument could. Even as I kept talking about design ideas, client growth, and potential partnerships, I noticed her gaze flickering away whenever I got animated. Not disinterest, calculation. A subtle, silent weighing of how much of me she was willing to share. By the time we returned, the tension had become almost physical. My chest felt heavier, as if the apartment itself was shrinking around the distance between us. And yet, I kept thinking she still loved me. That love, I realized, had never been for the man I was becoming. It had been for the one who needed her, who sought guidance, who fit into her comfortable vision of us. For the first time, I wondered if encouragement could ever truly be unconditional, or if it always came with invisible strings. Around month 10, the false revelation hit me. I caught her on her laptop, supposedly checking her email, but her screen showed a different kind of tab, one for a small design agency. I didn't see names, just the homepage with their portfolio. My mind raced. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe she was exploring side projects. Maybe she was curious. But a creeping thought planted itself anyway. Is she trying to compete with me? I spent the next week watching for patterns. She mentioned casual networking events. I met some creative people, she said lightly. She started asking subtle questions about my rates, my clients, my deadlines. I told myself she was just interested, supportive even. Then, late one night, I overheard her on a call. Yeah, it's going well. But I'm not sure he's sustainable at this pace, she murmured. My chest tightened. That phrase, the same one from the spreadsheet months ago, echoed in my head. Suddenly, all the little incidents, the misplaced hard drive, the gentle nudges to slow down, the notes about pacing, seemed like evidence of something bigger. I confronted her the next morning, heart pounding, ready to accuse. She blinked. Calm, measured. It's just research, she said. I like learning. Don't overthink it. I wanted to believe her. And I did. For a day, by the next morning, I started noticing subtle things again, how she lingered in the kitchen when I worked late. How she brought up shared bills at odd times, how she would question my decisions, not openly, but in passing comments. The false revelation had given me a mask for the truth, one that was almost comforting. I convinced myself it was competition or curiosity. Something external, and that's when I realized, the true challenge had never been anyone else, it had been her. The subtle sabotage became almost imperceptible. She never spoke ill of me, never outright tried to stop me. But there were constant little friction points, tiny things that chipped away at my confidence without leaving a mark. A casual comment about how my last design wasn't polished enough, an eyebrow raised at a client email I'd spent hours drafting, a slight sigh when I mentioned a new contract. I caught myself doubting myself for the first time since I'd quit the office. That was the cruelest part. It wasn't criticism, it was quiet, insidious erosion. One evening, I was preparing a pitch deck for a potential client, and she asked me to read aloud an article she had been editing. I obliged. 20 minutes later, I realized I hadn't touched my work once. I didn't realize you needed help with the deck, she said softly. Maybe you should rest tonight. I nodded, but anger bubbled beneath the surface. I was furious at myself for even considering it. Furious at her for making me hesitate. And yet, I felt this strange mix of guilt and love, then came the moment that snapped everything into perspective. She left her laptop open again, and this time I saw it clearly, a list of scenarios she had prepared for me. Each one meticulously planned, each one detailing what she thought my life should look like depending on how I performed in my freelance career. There was no jealousy. No secret affair. No external conspiracy, just control. The truth hit me like a punch. She had encouraged me to quit, yes, but not because she believed in me. She had expected me to struggle, to fail, to remain dependent and close. My success had broken her model of us, and in that realization, I felt a cold, hollow clarity. I had been living in her version of love. A love that only existed as long as I stayed small. Confronting her felt unnecessary, and yet inevitable. I waited until dinner, when the apartment was quiet, our usual soft playlist in the background. She poured wine into our glasses, smiling like nothing had shifted, like the world hadn't quietly rearranged itself around my success. "I know why you encouraged me to quit," I said finally, my voice low but steady. She froze mid-pour. "What do you mean?" I set my glass down, leaning forward. "You wanted me to depend on you. Not to succeed. You expected me to fail so I'd stay close." For a long moment, she didn't answer. Just stared at the table, fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "That's not how I thought it would go," she said at last. Her voice almost breaking. "I thought you'd struggle for a while, yes. I thought I'd guide you. But not like this. Not entirely independent." "So it was about control," I said. "Not support." She flinched at the word. "I thought I was helping. I thought I was protecting our bond." The irony wasn't lost on me. Protecting our bond by trying to keep me small. Encouraging me so I'd lean on her. A silent tether disguised as love. I wanted to be angry. To yell, to demand apologies. But the truth felt heavier than anger. It wasn't betrayal in the usual sense, it was a quiet, human selfishness. The kind you don't anticipate until it's staring you in the face. I realized then that our relationship had never been about partnership. Not really, it had been about her comfort. Her version of security, and my awakening had broken the equilibrium entirely. The aftermath wasn't explosive. There were no slamming doors, no ultimatums. We kept living together, moving around the apartment in careful, deliberate patterns. She cooked dinner, I handled projects. We spoke politely, sometimes warmly, but the undercurrent of expectation was impossible to ignore. Every smile, every touch, every casual remark carried a weight I had never felt before. I began thinking about my own choices. My career had grown beyond the office. I had achieved the independence she said she wanted me to have. But in doing so, I'd disrupted her comfort zone. I realized she hadn't hated my work, she had hated the fact that I didn't need her the way she needed me. One night, while cleaning my workspace, I found a note tucked into my portfolio folder. "Don't lose yourself. Don't forget us." I held it in my hands longer than necessary. The words felt heavy. Not because of sentiment, but because of implication. A gentle, almost loving command wrapped around control. I started leaving the office later, working longer hours, keeping my projects at a distance. Not because I wanted to hide success, but because the apartment itself had become a cage of expectations. Every conversation, every small smile, reminded me that the person I loved most wanted a version of me that no longer existed, and yet, I stayed. Not out of fear, but because leaving would be admitting she had shaped me. Subtly, all along, the irony was unbearable. She had encouraged me to grow, and resented the outcome. I kept wondering if she could ever see me as I was now. Or if she only ever wanted the man I used to be. Somewhere between love, resentment, and recognition, I understood the unspoken truth: relationships aren't always about what you give. Sometimes, they're about what the other person wants to keep for themselves, and I wasn't sure which was worse, leaving or staying. Months passed, and our life became a delicate choreography. We shared meals, laughter, even quiet Sunday mornings, but always with invisible lines drawn between us. I was no longer the uncertain man she had guided, I was fully myself. And she She had settled into a version of love that could coexist with my independence, but only just. I tried reaching for reconciliation. Inviting her to workshops, sharing my big wins, asking for opinions. She participated politely, but her reactions were measured, almost clinical. Her pride wasn't in my growth, it was in maintaining the balance she had once imagined for us. Late at night, I often stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the moments I had misread. The misplaced hard drives, the casual reminders to slow down, the spreadsheet that had felt like an accident but had been so deliberate. Every subtle move had been a test. Every suggestion, every nudge, a tiny rope meant to tether me, and yet, leaving wasn't simple. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't unkind. She loved me in her own way, but it was a love tied to dependency, to control, to familiarity. I realized some truths are impossible to fix, some bonds are defined not by the strength of love but by the limits of comfort. I still see her across the dining table sometimes, laughing lightly, glancing at her phone, leaving gentle notes on my desk. And I wonder, if I had failed, would we have been happy? Or was the tether always stronger than the love itself? I can't answer that. I only know the man she wanted me to be no longer exists. And the man I am now, successful, confident, independent, doesn't quite fit into the life we built together, so we stay, not because it works. Not because it's ideal. But because leaving would force both of us to confront a truth we are still learning to live with. Sometimes, love isn't enough when it's built on the desire to keep someone small, and maybe, that's the hardest lesson of all.